this film in particular, I wanted to make, when I reread David Copperfield about 10 or so years ago, and it just felt so cinematic and yet funny and experimental. It felt very modern. The opening chapter is David just being born, and just it's all written in words of like one syllable as he tries to make sense of shapes and colours and sounds and language, and then it gets more complicated. And then it's about this person growing up with, let's face it, status anxiety. Just wondering if he fits in and his background and is he making the right friends? So that it all felt very, very modern, and also it's really funny. There's scenes in the book that I've never seen in any adaptation of. When he falls in love with Dora, he sees the word Dora everywhere he goes. Or when he's drunk, it's described like, he shouts, "I've got mad hair," and "I've got drunken hair," and Dickens describes all of London sort of swirling around. It was like that scene in The Wolf of Wall Street where they're on drugs. So I felt cinematic. I want to kind of express this. This is the film I want to make, because it also speaks on these sort of contemporary issues as well. And I just want to get that life and that humour and approach it maybe as if there were no rules as to how you make like a costume drama, because I wanted it to feel that the audience feel that the people they're watching up there are in their present day. This is their modern world. I wanted to do that.
And this is a question for both of you, was the casting part of that process of creating a modern David Copperfield?
Well, we only ever had one candidate for David, which was David Patel.
That's right, yes.
So once he's your only candidate for David Copperfield, certain things flow, but over and above that, I think, London was the centre of the world, really, in Victorian
times. And the start of the Industrial Revolution as well, so it was like Manhattan in the 1920s or something.
And we felt London then and London now were both global cities, and we wanted to make it feel like the London the audience would recognise as well as the characters would recognise, because I think there's a lot of similarities.
Yes, I had no plan B. I mean, Dev was instantly the person I thought of. I just thought he's David Copperfield, and I'm so glad he said yes.
Was he the first cast member you booked?
That's right, yes. Yeah. I had spoken to Peter Capaldi while we were finishing something else up, and said, if I make David Copperfield, I'd like you to be Mr. Micawber. And he said, I'd love to. Again, traditionally we have this idea of Mr. Micawber as being this roly-poly, rather cheerful. But in the book, he's this melancholic, as soon as he's...
Talks in.
Yeah, and he talks about wanting to cut himself and stuff. It's kind of upsetting.
Dev, you talked about seeing the comedy in the writing, and you brought that to screen so beautifully. Dev, we know more as a dramatic actor. How did you know he could pull off the comedy?
Well, in fact, I always, from Skins onwards, I'd always knew that he could do the comedy. I've seen him do the comedy. In fact, I was watching him do in Lion that I thought, but also he's got that strength and that focus and steeliness and charisma, because and he has to go through the whole range. He's in every scene. Apart from 15 minutes when Jay is playing young David, and so he has to go through that, and then it was just fun pushing away at what kind of going from like slapstick to physical to visual to kind of emotional to still to strong to vulnerable. It was all about that, and yes, it was so. Seeing him in Lion sort of completed that. It was as soon as I saw him in Lion, I kind of more or less pointed and said, "That's David Copperfield." I know. So I can see externally why after stuff like Thick of It and Death of Stalin, people might have a different view of that. But I kind of, if there is a reason, and I'm not saying this is the kind of conscious reason, I kind of didn't want to make something that there's so much. I wanted to make something positive. What I liked about the book and what I wanted to get in the film was something that was. First of all, I wanted to do like a film for all generations, really, so that any children, the elderly, anyone in between can get something from it, because it is about a life lived, and we've noticed that feedback from people coming to screenings, saying that they all kind of talk about it as a family. I wanted to do that. And because there's so much of a debate at the moment about what Britain is and what Britain is not, and how it, how it's excluding and how it's isolating itself, I wanted to celebrate what I feel Britain is, which is something much more lively and vibrant and cheery, and the comedy heritage that Britain has, the literary heritage, the variety, the arts, the culture, it's everything about it. And also, personally, I just wanted to do something that was about friendship and about community, without losing sight of the sort of the darker or the harder issues that the Dickens never shies away from, like the homelessness and so on. Arrives at Aunt Betsy's house and flops onto the sofa and looks out the window and sees Aunt Betsy in the distance hitting the donkey rider on the head. And it's described, like from David's perspective, indoors, watching this kind of like silent movie. And when that happened, I thought, yeah, I can see this. I know how to do it. I don't know what it is. He's very. It may be due to the fact that he was in the habit of writing his stories on a sort of weekly and a monthly basis, so he was always having to keep the plot bubbling. But also, I think he wasn't embarrassed or felt awkward with the fact that he was principally wants to do an entertainment, to provide entertainment for a mass public. So therefore, and then he had this innate, instinctive sense of comedy, and comedy is terribly, it's very verbal, but it's also visual, and it's funny, when comedy writers are on set, they know visually where the camera should point, because they know what the funny shot is going to be. And it may be that his innate sense of comedy was what sort of propelled him to be able to write his comic set pieces in a sort of visual manner.
We talked quite early on, didn't we, about the sequence where he goes back to the boat's house as a grown-up with Steerforth, and how different it all appears to him the second time round.
Yeah.
Colours are more muted, it seems much smaller. I mean, those are very cinematic ideas about how memory works.
That's right, yes. And I'd never actually seen that described in literature before, that thing of like how your memory of childhood slightly plays tricks on you. You sort of over-romanticised it. As
everything seemed very big to me.
That's right, yeah. The other interesting thing, just talking about the modernity, is Mr. Dick, played by Hugh Laurie, is the first real depiction in English literature of mental illness, but dealt with openly rather than as a kind of joke. There's a sort of sadness to the portrayal of Mr. Dick that we wanted to capture there, and Hugh does amazingly. Conflated. Well, I mean, it's always, this was an exercise we had to perform in The Death of Stalin, where every scene was both tragic and comedy at the same time. And that's the thing I also admire about Dickens' approach, is that he does that. He gives you the comic set piece, and then he'll give you a dramatic moment straight away, where where the comedy doesn't undermine the drama, but sort of leads you slightly down one alley, so you're then blindsided by how do we do it? I don't know. I mean, we spend a lot of time. We spend a lot of time in the script. We also spend a lot of time getting the cast in early and rehearsing for like 2 weeks in a church hall. Really talking about the characters and getting them to play off against each other, so that the characterization is three-dimensional. That they arrive on the first day of filming already knowing what this character's background is, what their feelings are, what the thoughts are for the other characters, and so on. So that hopefully, when there are the comic set pieces, you're seeing these as moments that are happening to real individuals rather than sort of comic types, I suppose.
To try and stretch your talents and your...
Well, it was, I mean, with every project you do, I always feel you learn something, and in doing something like Vita, I learned how to work on a sort of big stage, big production resource, which was different from the thick of it, which was very much 2 cameras and a set of small offices. With The Death of Stalin, I suppose we learned about sort of working with a period, to try and make periods feel real and authentic. With this, I was very conscious of the fact that David is telling a story. He's telling a story of his own life, but he's also telling a story about other people that he's kind of he's kind of trying to, it's in the writing of it that he's sort of working out who he is. So that element of kind of both the real things that are happening to him, but also using artifice to kind of lay it out, I think was something I wanted to try and carry. So I thought every now and then, if one is reminded occasionally that this is the telling of a story, but not so much that you don't feel detached from the people in the story. It was an element of that. I also kind of wanted, going back to trying to keep it real and authentic 1840s, I kind of wanted to avoid the CGI special effect thing because I just felt it would look out of place here.
We talked a lot about trying to have more traditional cinematic kind of techniques, old techniques really.
Yeah,
painted backdrop, but for some of the transitions, which are all to do with the fluidity of the storytelling that Armando and Simon had, but it's also, you know, using those old techniques allows you to keep the thing very grounded in a kind of cinematic narrative.
Exactly. We even used it one point, Pepper's Ghost, which is the thing they used in Victoria Theatre for like ghosts to appear on stage.
Yeah,
it was just a
when
mirror.
Steerforth in the mirror in the writing sequence, I mean, that's not put in post.
Yes, so the actors are actually around the corner, so they can actually, if they want, have a two-way conversation going. And try to have, you know, when a scene transitions into the next scene, actually have the elements of the first scene physically at the location for the next scene, so we can just walk into it. I just wanted to, you know, rein in the kind of the default of doing, you know, special effects.
Objectives were for it, I guess.
Two initial thoughts I had before anything happened was, I wanted to make something that you didn't have to have any notion of who Dickens was or any notion of the novel David Copperfield in the first place. So there was that. And then B, I wanted to capture the essence of the book that excited me. And to me, the essence of it is not so much, you know, the plot as the kind of the emotional journey, but also the language, the humour, the imagery, the playfulness of it, and that whole thing, modernity, the kind of the idea of a writer writing and then rewriting his or her own life to kind of make it fit some idea that they're starting to, all those things. I wanted to keep that. And after that, it became quite, and then the next thing we did was Simon went away and actually did a draft consisting entirely of Dickens dialogue, which was great to read, but it then made you realise, you know, what were the strong elements and what were the elements we had to kind of remove because they were too much concerned with, you know, trying to summarise a 900-page novel. And I didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do was make a film that had a kind of beginning, middle, and end, and had a through line to it. And so we started taking some of the elements that we missed as we were cutting. We started to take elements of them to give to some of the main characters, like Mr. Micawber. So in the book, it's a different teacher who plays a flute that's makes a terrible noise, and Steerforth gets that teacher dismissed for being poor, you know, and just, you know, showing the school up. And we thought that would be a perfect element to give to Mr. Micawber, because I was also conscious if you've got your Dick Maldi and you've got Mr. Dick and Hugh, Laurie, so you want to keep these characters present throughout. So it was about that. It was about not feeling so reverential about the book that you couldn't change anything, but at the same time being very committed to trying to capture the essence, the creative essence of it. I think it's different from television where you have a sort of open-ended thing. With film, it's a different part of your brain you use. It's about keeping the whole thing constantly in your head at any one time.
I mean, it was a complex shoot, as you can imagine, because there was no possibility really, although we did start filming at the beginning of the shoot, but the rest of it was very much geographically driven because of all the places we had to go. And so I think that's right, you know, that's always the thing I marvel at directors and actors to some extent, that you're shooting these scenes ridiculously out of sequence. Hence the rehearsal period, but it really is up to the director.
The actors say that the rehearsal is great just because it gives them a chance to do the whole story in the right order. but also to see each other's story in the right order as well, so that when they come into the shoot a scene, and it might be out of sequence, they'll know roughly where everyone else is in their story, and therefore in their kind of emotional kind of mood and so on. But it's about that, it's about keeping that sense of shape, I think. So it's very easy to get caught up in the moment when you're shooting.
Well, every day seems like a small mountain to climb, doesn't it, when you're shooting, so you have to be able to look beyond the foothills.
Exactly. You might shoot a scene and it's really, really very big and energetic, but you realise actually it's just coming out of a scene that's very, maybe much more still. You know, so are you? Is the link going to work, or should you just tone this down while we're here shooting? Should we ask them to do a kind of slightly quieter version so that the transition won't drop? It's things like that. It's just holding the rhythm and shape of it in your head all the time, which is always hard, but I think it's kind of really, it's the thing I kind of enjoy with it, is trying to keep the musicality of it at all times in your head.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Right here on the right.
Oh, hello, hi. I spoke to them. We looked at housing conditions in the 1840s, and Dickens actually describes where they found an answer. He describes it as a building that a landlord had bought and then subdivided so much that people were living in tiny little spaces. And I spoke to Shelter about how that related to conditions now. And I mean, the shocking thing was that, you know, the status of landlords hasn't changed in the UK. You know, they have many, many more rights and powers than, and less oversight than they have on the European mainland. So tenants can be, you know, it's such a precarious position. But also the housing condition. We wanted to, it's that thing I was talking about, although we set in 1840, I wanted to touch on this sense of it happening in front of us now. And so when we showed David being homeless as well as little Emily, you know, I wanted it to feel real, not just as for the conditions of 1840, but also for now as well.